You ever have feelings for someone and they just don't? And you're stuck with this gnawing feeling in your chest that you can't even call heartbreak because technically nothing happened. You're out here grieving something that was entirely in your head. I keep coming back to the fact that cartoons, of all things, got this feeling right more than so many other shows I've watched. So today I want to break down how 4 animated shows dissected every stage of one-sided love and what they were trying to actually tell us.
What you're feeling is called infatuation. The pain is a product of you overvaluing a projected imaginary relationship with me.
There's a specific kind of obsession that gets mistaken for love. Psychologists actually have a word for it: limerence. It's what happens when the real person in front of you slowly gets replaced by a version of them you've been building in your head. You stop seeing them for who they are and start seeing your own story. And the scary part is that it feels completely real from the inside. But the person you're longing for doesn't exist anywhere except in your own head. Adventure Time is probably the most honest depiction of this I've seen, and Finn is the perfect case study for it. His whole identity is built around being a hero: save the princess, fight the monsters, complete the quest. So naturally, from almost the moment we meet him, he has a crush on Princess Bubblegum. Classic. He blushes around her, gives her fine little origami gifts, and gets visibly jealous when Ricardio shows up and takes his spot. It's cute, but it's also pretty one-sided. He's just a kid, and she's a princess. PB is older, she runs a whole kingdom, and it's pretty clear that she sees Finn more as a brave little knight more than anything else. Which, in fairness, he kind of is, the little boy knight who could. But then we get to season 3, where after the events of Mortal Recoil, PB de-ages back to 13. Finn's age. And for one episode, everything he's been hoping for is suddenly possible. They prank Lemon Grab together, they run around like idiots. They're equals. It's genuinely sweet. Then she has to age back up to save her kingdom.
My people need me, and that comes first.
Finn watches her walk back into the tower. The episode ends with him staring up at her from below. And that shot was very much on purpose, visually showcasing the pedestal that Finn puts PB on. Because this was the episode that was the turning point in how Finn viewed PB. He fell for the version of her that had one free afternoon to be a chaotic 13-year-old with them. The real PB was a lot older than him, had a kingdom to run, citizens to protect, a life that had absolutely nothing to do with his feelings about her. He can't see that though, because he's not really looking at her. He's looking at what he put together in his head. This becomes painfully obvious in Incendium when Finn very awkwardly tries to lay in PB's lap. PB turns him down again, and Finn genuinely goes into a full breakdown.
Finn, no. Come on, Finn, don't be weird.
And then Jake comes back with Flame Princess. FP shows up at the treehouse and accidentally burns through Finn's room, including his actual physical shrine to Princess Bubblegum, the PB memorabilia he'd been keeping like an altar in his bedroom. And within about 30 seconds of meeting this girl,
dude, I think I have a crush.
He went from sobbing on the floor over Princess Bubblegum to being infatuated with a complete stranger in the span of an episode. Because this was never really about PB as a person, it was about the character, about her feeling a role. The slot in his hero story that says, Princess goes here. FP fit the slot perfectly, so she got loaded in. Which is also why, even when he's genuinely falling for Flame Princess, he still hasn't fully let go of PB. He's spent a lot of emotional stakes on her. In Burning Low, PB shows up to warn him that FP's elemental matrix is unstable and she could accidentally burn through the Earth's core. A completely scientific concern that has nothing to do with Finn romantically, but he's so deep in the story he wrote about her that he can't see it for what he is. He explodes.
Bubblegum, I can't do this anymore!
What?
Now you like me?
He accuses her of being jealous and storms off.
Now I'm ready to move on, and it's like, you're gonna build me up all over again.
This whole confrontation was a projection. That's what the pedestal costs you. It completely distorts your ability to read what's actually happening right in front of you. When Flame Princess eventually ends things with Finn after Frost and Fire, watch what he does next. He goes straight back to Bubblegum, shows up at the Candy Kingdom in Too Old, and tells Jake he has no expectates, while very clearly lying to himself. He barely notices the Lemon Grabs' kingdom falling apart around him. He's going through the motions of trying to win PB back by again projecting that 13-year-old onto her while barely being present in the same room with current PB, and she finally calls him out on it.
Finn, I I have citizens who need me. I can't always treat everything like a little boy game.
And that's put nicely. He keeps running away from his feelings, transferring the obsession onto someone new, then running back to the old image when the new thing collapses because he never dealt with that image in the first place. It was dumb of him to try these things, but that's what makes it so relatable. He is a 13-year-old boy. At the end of the day, he finally realizes that bubblegum is simply too old for him.
I'm thinking maybe age isn't just a number. Maybe older people, really are different. You know? Less fun inside.
Over the course of the rest of the show, Finn's obsession dissolved slowly as he matured and went through more heartbreaks and relationships. The image just slowly lost its grip as a teenage daydream. But sometimes the feeling doesn't go anywhere on its own. Sometimes the only way through it to process it is to walk straight toward the thing you've been avoiding and just ask, get the answer, and trust it. That takes a completely different kind of courage and maturity, and it costs something. Dipper Pines knows exactly what it costs. Dipper Pines is 12 years old and solves every problem with his head, the correct one. He plans, he researches, he makes lists. In one episode, he literally clones himself to execute a complex multi-step strategy to get a dance with a girl at a party. The clones have a clipboard. So science, wow. His crush on Wendy Corderay, a girl 3 years older than him, is also doing more than one job and not using the correct head. It's not just that he likes her, but getting the older, cooler girl is proof to himself that he's not that dorky, insecure kid. The crush is a coming-of-age shortcut for him. Which is why, instead of ever being emotionally and intellectually honest about it, he puts her on that pedestal and puts on a sort of performance. He lies about his age to hang out with Wendy's older friends, tells Mabel he doesn't have a crush, then lays awake at night thinking about her. He uses a time travel device to replay the same day over and over again until he gets the outcome that he thinks he wants. He sabotages her boyfriend under the guise of protecting her. This kid has literally tried everything except the one thing that actually terrifies him. Then we get to the episode Into the Bunker. Mabel finds a letter Dipper wrote confessing his feelings, physically shoves him and Wendy into a closet, and refuses to let them out until he talks. He still can't do it. Then, during a fight with a shapeshifter, Dipper finds out what he thinks is Wendy's body. He thinks she's dead. And he finally says it, through tears, to what he thinks is her unconscious or dead body, in a bunker during a monster attack. The body turns out to be the shapeshifter, though. The real Wendy was standing right behind him the whole time. She heard everything. They finish the fight, get outside, and she addresses it.
I'm, super flattered, but I'm too old for you. I mean, you know that, right?
Wendy's flat honesty is genuinely the kindest thing she could do here. She tells him the truth warmly and clearly, and then she points directly at what is real between them, the friendship. And Dipper accepts it. He chooses the friendship, and the show validates that choice across almost every episode that follows. And right before Dipper leaves Gravity Falls, Wendy swaps hats with him. Her trapper hat for his pine tree cap.
Something to remember me by.
The friend zone is probably the most useless framing for what Dipper went through. Friend zone is a term invented by people who think that friendship is a lesser outcome, a prison to be stuck in when you want to be somewhere else, a punishment for trying. Dipper's arc is the clearest argument against that framing I've seen in any cartoon. What he got after the rejection wasn't lesser, it was just different, and arguably better than what he thought he wanted. It wasn't realistic really any other way, and the fact that she offered this friendship to him after that is more than he could have hoped for. When someone tells you no, they're not punishing you, they're giving you accurate information about their reality. What you do with that information is the actual measure of your character. Dipper's real courage wasn't the confession in the bunker, it was choosing what came after day and being very okay with it. Finn built a fantasy and couldn't let go, though he did eventually grow out of it. Dipper got his answer and chose to accept it. But there is a third version of this that I think does more damage than either of those, and that's when the person just never decides. Just keeps you in a permanent maybe, where you're not together, but you're not together. And the whole time, this person is telling themselves that they're being careful with your feelings, when really they're just being careful with their own. That is the situation of Mordecai. That is 6 seasons of regular show. And unlike Finn and Dipper, Mordecai isn't a kid figuring things out. He's a 23-year-old art school dropout working as a groundskeeper. He's an adult in every sense, which makes everything he does significantly harder to excuse. The whole thing starts with Margaret, who works at the coffee shop he goes to every single day. For about 4 seasons, Mordecai can barely form a sentence around this girl. He makes up excuses to go get coffee just to be near her. Every time he gets close, he either ends up Mordecaiing the situation, or Margaret already has another guy in her life. But finally, he confesses in Stake Me Amadeus. He takes her to a nice restaurant, he puts it all out there. Margaret is genuinely moved, but then delivers the gut punch. She just got into her dream college and has to leave.
I'm sorry, but I can't be your girlfriend.
It's not a rejection of him at all. It's just life and a bad moment. But Mordecai barely processes it and immediately starts dating CJ, a girl he'd already gone on a date with back in season 3, and then whom he completely ditched the second he thought Margaret was available. What's painful is that Mordecai and CJ actually work. She's funny, she's artistic, she pushes back on him in ways that are genuinely good for him. They have real chemistry. Real Date is a great episode, they're really good together. But the entire time, Mordecai is still somewhat hoping that Margaret will come back and take over. He never really got over her. CJ was just the person he was with while keeping one eye on the door. And then Margaret comes back to town as a news reporter, and everything starts falling apart in slow motion. At the Christmas party, the two of them start reminiscing when a little montage of old memories play, and they kiss, as CJ watches in horror. It's one of the most uncomfortable episodes in the series. Mordecai was completely unable to draw a line between his past and his present because he never processed the past in the first place. He kept CJ in one hand and the possibility of Margaret in the other, and that Christmas party is what it looks like when you try to hold both. Things spiral. Margaret eventually confesses to CJ that she also still has feelings for Mordecai.
I was just scared and tired of everything being awkward. I am sick of feeling like a tourist around my own friends.
Everyone is getting hurt. Margaret feels like an outsider in her own friend group. CJ is losing trust in her relationship. Mordecai, however, still somehow manages to salvage the situation, and over the next few episodes convinces CJ that seeing Margaret just brought back some old feelings, but now he's completely over it. Spoiler alert, he is not. Then comes the wedding episode. Muscleman and Starla's wedding. Mordecai is supposed to read a letter from Muscle Dad about finding your co-pilot in life. He reads the letter, and then just keeps going.
But I know that for a long time I've been ignoring my gut, because I didn't want to hurt anyone. But instead of saving their feelings, it's just made everyone around me miserable.
And weirdly, this is actually Mordecai being decisive for the first time. He's done. He knows what he's been doing, and he's admitting it out loud. The problem is that he's doing it here, like this, with zero warning to anyone. Oof. He stood up at a wedding, made his speech about where his soulmate is while pointing at a bunch of strangers during someone else's wedding, and publicly admitted that he's been in a relationship he wasn't certain about for years, which is the most honest he's been for the entire show, just awfully timed and not very healthy to anyone.
You didn't even point in my direction.
She'd probably known for a while. The Christmas kiss didn't come from nowhere. He tells Rigby,
I told you I'm no good at this stuff.
Yeah, you're the worst.
that's the line he keeps falling back on. Like emotional honesty is a talent you're either born with or you're not, and as if any of that is an excuse. But Mordecai can bluff his way through basically anything else in his life, so his inability to be honest about love is a choice he keeps making because the truth would require him to be vulnerable. And up until this point, he'd rather let everyone around him slowly bleed out than risk that. CJ ends up cutting contact with everyone. One person's indecision and actions thereof cost her an entire circle of people that she cared about. If you're keeping someone in a maybe right now, understand that the person on the other end of your indecision is real. Their feelings are real, and they're going somewhere while yours spin in place. Half loving someone hurts more than clearly not loving them at all, and if the other person is seeing a future with you and you're maybe not so sure, choose, communicate, or let them go. Anything in between is using someone else's hopes against them. But with all the characters we've talked about up until this point, you can kind of find something fixable somewhere in there. See the real person, get the answer, Just be honest earlier and allow yourself to be somewhat vulnerable. There is a path through all of those. Rick and Unity don't have a path. If you've seen the breakdown I did on why Rick can't find love, hint hint, go check out the channel, you already know that his genius and superiority complex basically function as a prison that stop him from genuinely connecting with anyone he considers beneath him, which is everyone. But the Unity episode takes all of that cosmic scale stuff and just reduces it down to a hive mind covering an entire planet and a guy who loves someone and ends up destroying it. As we've said, Unity is a hive mind. She is not one person, she is billions of bodies with one consciousness. She's assimilated an entire planet and turned it into a functioning utopia. And she's also Rick's ex. The second they run into each other, they rekindle instantly, and for a little while, Rick is genuinely happy. In the most degenerate way possible, of course, but still happy to a sense. Because Unity is probably the only entity in the multiverse that operates at the same level of complexity as his ginormous brain. Talking to Unity is the closest Rick ever gets to talking to an equal, because he's talking to a billion brains at the same time. But the more time Rick spends with Unity, the more Unity starts losing control of the planet. And Summer, watching all of this, says the thing that nobody ever says to Rick's face.
I think Unity's great and you're a horrible influence on it.
Rick ignores this completely, of course, sends the kids home and keeps partying. Then he goes to the bathroom, comes back, and everyone is gone. The whole planet is empty. Where'd they all go? Unity evacuated an entire civilization, indoors and underground and wherever, just to get away from him. And scattered across every surface, on walls and notes and scraps of paper everywhere, is a breakup letter.
Rick, forgive me for doing this in notes. I'm not strong enough to do it in persons.
The note continues.
I lose who I am and become part of you. Because in a strange way, you're better at what I do without even trying. Yours. And nobody else's. Unity.
That last line. Unity is a hive mind. Absorbing and directing other consciousnesses is literally her whole existence. And she's telling Rick that he does it better than her without even trying. Everyone in his orbit, pun intended, slowly stops being themselves and starts becoming a satellite of Rick. Unity realizes that staying with him meant eventually stopping being Unity. Rick goes home. Beth confronts him about some alien in the garage, and for maybe the first time ever, Rick just agrees with whatever she's saying without arguing. He goes into the garage and does one of the darkest things in the show. He puts together a death ray and sticks his own head in the machine. The smartest man in the multiverse gets a completely accurate diagnosis of his problem from the one person who loved him enough to be honest about it, and his response is to try to die rather than to accept it and change. In the post-credits scene, Rick shows up at another hive mind's base demanding to see Unity. He gets told that she's classified him as a hostile entity. He rages about it for 30 seconds, and then stops when Morty asks him to, because somewhere in between, he probably knows that this one was on him and there is no changing it. Both of them felt it. The love was real and mutual, and he was happier with her. It just still couldn't work because Rick is too broken and self-centered and controlling to be in that relationship without consuming the other person and overwhelming their personality. And that is the scariest version of this whole conversation. Because sitting with the question of what it is about you that keeps making love impossible requires a kind of honesty most people spend their whole lives avoiding. It's not just Rick that's capable of doing this, it's anyone. You don't have to be a genius, you just have to take too much control. So, what do you actually do with all of this? Well, start with actually seeing the other person for who they are, not the version you've been building in your head, the real one. Finn couldn't do that, and it cost him years of emotional labor. Next, go get the answer you're dreading. The maybe is so much worse than the no. You're spinning this person 360 degrees in your head, and that does no one any favors. Dipper spent an entire summer doing elaborate, insane things to avoid one honest conversation. And the no, when it finally came, thankfully wasn't at the end of multiple years, but it also wasn't the end of their relationship. It was the first real thing that happened between them as real friends. And if you're the one keeping someone else in the maybe, gather the courage to be honest and decisive with them. Mordecai thought staying in the middle was being careful with people. Half loving someone is not actually kind, though. It's just a slower, more painful way of hurting them. And finally, before you move on to the next person, ask yourself what you keep bringing into these things. Rick and Unity genuinely loved each other, but it still couldn't work because Rick kept making everyone around him smaller without even noticing. He never looked at that, just moved on to the next distraction, used and abused his ego and narcissism. If the same thing keeps going wrong with different people, at some point that is worth sitting with. One-sided love, however it appears, feels like something the other person is doing to you. How dare they not feel the same way I feel about them? But keep in mind, every single show we talked about eventually turned the camera back around. It's not the other person who's the focus, it's the main character. Away from the lovee and to the lover, and to ourselves to look at what we can improve. What they were projecting, what they were avoiding, what we are avoiding, what we couldn't say, what we couldn't bear to receive the bad news of. The real work was never about ending up in the good graces of the person we love. It was about becoming and being the person that is worthy of their love. And hey, sometimes that doesn't end up the way you want. And hey, sometimes you just have to be okay with that. Turns out that life, love, and relationships isn't exactly easy. One could say they're actually kind of hard a lot of the time. And you just have to try. That's what life is about. You just have to try. You have to seek someone and love them for who they are, and they have to love you back for who you are. That's just how it goes. That's what life is all about. The relationships, the meaning they add, doing things with them, with people you care about. That's really all I can say on the matter. I've been in a relationship for a while, and it gives my life a lot of meaning, and I know a lot of our watchers are in relationships, or maybe not in relationships, but I can say that whoever you are, it's worth it to seek out people you care about and who care for you back. If you want to go check out our channel, like and subscribe, watch some other videos, we would super appreciate it. We actually did a video on Rick specifically, why he keeps ending up alone, what the central finite curve says about him. I broke all of that down in the last video. Worth watching that one back to back with this one, so go check it out, and we'll see you in the next one.